Father, you were ordained as my name is Fitzgerald and I act for Mr. Paul Levy, as well as Miss Anne Levy. You were ordained as a priest in 1973.
True.
And by the time frame that we were talking about, which was 1982, when you were an assistant priest at Warrnambool, you'd been in that role for 8.5 years. Is that correct?
Yes, I was assistant priest went there in 1980, and I went to Eden Hope in 1984.
And would you agree with the proposition that 8.5 years on the job is ordinarily long enough to have assumed some confidence in yourself and in your standing in that role?
Yes.
And you were no longer the diffident junior priest that you were in 1973 when it was reported to you that a Christian brother had exposed himself to a child.
Yes.
You'd grown in the role. In fact, you were only 18 months away from an appointment as a parish priest. Is that correct?
True.
You accepted that appointment. Did you put your name forward for that appointment?
No, I accepted the appointment.
You'd agree with the proposition that 8.5 years on the job is ordinarily long enough to be confident enough to take any concerns you had about a colleague to someone more senior within the organisation.
True.
Can I just ask you some questions about the zone meetings that you attended when you were in Warrnambool? You indicate that those were held several times each year?
Yes.
And you attended those zone meetings?
Yes.
Though you were only an assistant priest?
Yes.
And which of the parishes were relevant to the zone meetings for Mortlake?
For Mortlake? Mortlake's part of the southern zone, and the parishes that would go to the zone meetings would be parishes of Eden Hope and Casterton and Coleraine and Hamilton and Penshurst and Port Fairy, Portland, Warrnambool parishes, Port Fairy, Koroit, Terang, big zone, and Camperdown, Colac.
I take it from that long list that there were a large number of priests and assistant priests in attendance at the zone meetings.
True.
And Gerald Ridsdale would attend those meetings?
Yes, I presume so, if he was when he was in Mortlake.
And they were the only occasions on which you would see Gerald Ridsdale, or did you see him in other settings?
It would generally be at such meetings or diocesan meetings, Ballarat. And
occasionally the meetings were held at Mortlake itself, or was there a fixed location where the southern zone meetings were held?
No, generally, and especially in those times, yeah, we still move around a bit, but not as much as we used to. So I can certainly remember, I can't remember them being in Gerald Ridsdale's time, but I can remember going to Mortlake for zone meetings.
Were they formal meetings? Were any records kept?
Yes.
Were there minutes of those meetings?
Yes.
And ordinarily, what was the matter for discussion at those zone meetings?
Ordinarily, pastoral issues, how to be more effective, what was happening, perhaps at the time, like feasts or celebrations or themes coming up, how we could, involve the people more in church life.
And were the following persons present at least some of those meetings in 1982? Monsignor Fiscalini?
Yes.
Henry Nolan?
Yes.
Did the bishop ever attend?
No.
Can you recall any of the other persons who were present at those meetings?
Father Paddy Bowen, I'll say some of the senior priests. Father Paddy Bowen, yes. Yes, probably Father Downs of Port Fairy, Koroit.
So certainly,
Father Frank Crowe of Portland.
Certainly some of the then consultors of the diocese would attend at those southern zone meetings.
Every likelihood.
Now, I'd suggest that the occasion on which you became aware that there was a child living in the presbytery with Gerald Ridsdale was at one of those meetings when you saw the child.
No.
Do you have a recollection of seeing the child?
No.
You said in your private hearing, and I'll just refer you to the page reference, it was at page 1995, that you didn't have much to do with Ridsdale in those days, and then at line 2 you say, perhaps I even saw him with this child, and you know it might have been said that he's looking after that child, and you tend to think, well, you know, that child must absolutely need a home. I ask again, do you have any recollection of seeing Gerald Ridsdale with the child, either at Mortlake or anywhere else?
Look, I've got a faint recollection of perhaps seeing the child in the car with Gerald Ridsdale.
On the occasion of his attendance at a zone meeting, is that correct?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Well, you know, Gerald Ridsdale would be busy in the zone meeting, and you know, it's probably be just more driving around Warrnambool or something. You know, I may have a faint picture of that.
And you say it wasn't discussed?
No.
You didn't hear gossip about it?
No.
And you became aware that the child was living with Gerald Ridsdale because you had seen the child with him?
Yes.
Did you ask, on seeing the child in the car, did you ask someone why there was a child in the car with Gerald Ridsdale?
No.
But you were certainly aware in 1982 that there was a child living with him in the presbytery?
I could not be precise about dates at all.
But it was a situation that you had concerns about?
It was very different. It was unusual, and perhaps, as I've said there and as you've put up before me, I was naive enough to think that it may have been a noble thing that he was being a father figure for a disadvantaged child.
You also agreed with the propositions that it was unusual, that it was unwise, and it was dangerous.
Yes.
And you had those concerns at the time?
Not so much at the time. It's probably in hindsight.
You indicated that your reaction was, when you became aware of this, that you questioned yourself, is that permissible? Is that ideal? That would suggest that you had misgivings about the arrangement that you'd become aware of.
Yes.
And again, you were a relatively senior assistant priest. You'd been in the role for 8.5 years, and you could have taken those concerns to your parish priest or to someone else within the diocese.
Yes, but as I said, I think I put my emphasis on it was possibly a noble thing for him to be caring for, you know, a most disadvantaged child. The fact that he took him into his home and gave him a home and cared for him.
You indicated that you asked yourself the question, is that permissible? There was nothing preventing you from asking that question of your parish priest or of the bishop.
That's true.
It was a matter that concerned you, and you didn't discuss it with other priests?
No.
And you didn't discuss it with the bishop?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Father, you said you have written to the bishop regarding paedophilia matters.
Yes.
Which bishop did you write to?
It would have been Bishop Peter Connors. And I wrote it from Port Fairy. Someone came to see me in Port Fairy.
One letter?
One letter that I'm confident of speaking about.
When was that written?
Well, I'll just have a look at my years in Port Fairy. Yes, I went there. So somewhere in the 90s, the years 96 to 99. I saw that letter on a file of my records.
Right. Do we have the letter?
I don't know offhand, Your Honour.
Sorry?
I don't know offhand, but we're looking into that.
Can you just tell her what was the gravamen of the letter? What were you saying?
Yeah, well, when I had the private hearing, the solicitor who helped me had my file,
Yeah.
and that letter was in the file. I would have forgotten about it.
Can you tell us what was the gravamen of the letter? What was the content?
Yeah, I'm vague on it, but I can just recall that some woman came to speak to me about a concern of of someone associated with her, perhaps the son, I don't know. In the light of the fact that she visited me with such a concern, I wrote a letter to the bishop.
To say what? To say what to the bishop?
To say I was alerted by this woman who had a concern and revealed to me that someone that she was associated with had been abused by a priest.
Can you write down the name of the priest for me? Have we got a piece of paper?
Actually, I can't even recall that. But I'm surprised that someone here hasn't got that letter, because it was on my file.
Does anyone have the letter? No one puts up their hand.
Your Honour, I do have a record of some correspondence. I'm about to get to the right letter, I think. Your Honour, there are possibly 3 items of correspondence that may match the description. It'll take a few moments to get a hard copy. We might, if subject to any other questions, we might stand farther down in the meanwhile.
I really just wanted to know, you wrote on this occasion,
Yes.
because of the concern of the lady.
Yes.
Did you write out of a concern that the priest might abuse other children?
Yes.
Well, the obvious question is, why didn't you do that after the hospital visit?
Oh, I've learnt a lot in those last 20 years. Yeah. Despite the fact that it's been mentioned that how mature I might have been in the 1980s, but I've matured a lot and become more streetwise, since then.
What do you mean? What have you learned?
I've learnt about pedophilia that I didn't know about in my early years, and the problem of pedophilia in the church and in our diocese.
Yes, but here you have allegations about, in both cases, a crime being committed on a child.
Yes.
You knew it was a crime on both occasions, didn't you?
Yes.
Well, why the difference?
Experience has probably, taught me such things as mandatory reporting and, and enabling, work to be done by the diocese for victims, for those who suffer, families.
Apart from helping those who suffered, were you not concerned on both occasions to do what you could to stop one of your colleagues from committing further crimes on children?
Well, I'd like to think I was. Yes, and yes.
Staying
Yes.
silent.
Yes.
Staying silent didn't advance that, did it?
No.
If we find the letter, we'll have a look at it in due course. But
It's on a letterhead from Port Fairy Parish.
Father, can I show you a name? It's a family name, and I ask you not to say the name.
Yes.
The letter you're referring to, was that in relation to a visit by Bishop Connors to that family?
No.
No. That didn't help, Your Honour.
Do you have any further questions?
I don't, Your Honour, no.
Well, thank you, Father. That ends your evidence. You are excused.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Your Honour, I call Father Arundel, Daniel Arundel.
Do you take an oath on the Bible, Father? Would you repeat after me? I swear by Almighty God
I swear by Almighty God
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
that the evidence I shall give in this Royal Commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Take a seat, please.
Thank you, Father. Will you state your full names, please,
Daniel Arundel,
and your current occupation?
retired,
And retired priest of the Catholic Diocese of Ballarat, I take it.
correct.
Father, on your screen, I'll ask that you be shown your church curriculum vitae. Father, before we get into the past, let's just deal with the present. Is it the case that you are currently a visiting priest at Timboon and, I'm not sure how to say it, you can help me?
That's right. Corragalac, Cororook, same place.
Cororook parishes. Thank you, Father. So you're a visit, whilst you're retired, you're nevertheless a visiting priest at those parishes?
I'm the visiting priest,
Yes.
both those parishes.
Thank you. And then if we look in your past, you studied at the Corpus Christi College Seminary at Werribee 1949 to 1956, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you were ordained as a priest in the Diocese of Ballarat in July 1956.
Yes, that's right.
And you served as assistant priest in 5 different parishes between 1956 and 1977, is that right?
1956 to when?
1971.
Correct.
And that included the parish of Mildura in the period December 1963 to May 1968.
That's right.
Now, Monsignor John Day was parish priest of Mildura from 1956 to 1972. Were you aware of that?
I am.
And so he was the parish priest there when you were the assistant priest, is that right?
That's correct.
Yes. Right, I'll come back to that. And then you've served as parish priest in 5 different parishes, is that right?
I suppose I can't count them. Correct. Whatever they were, I was anyway.
Well, I have there Hopeton, Camperdown, Swan Hill, Robinvale,
And Maryborough.
and Maryborough. Maryborough,
Correct.
yes. And then you've served some administrator of some parishes over time as well, is that right?
I did, yeah. I resigned from Maryborough and took on the role of administering parishes that were in transition for quite a while.
Yes.
Then I became the visiting priest to Orion and Sea Lake for a number of years, and now I'm visiting priest.
Yes, thank you, Father. And you served as a consultor in the diocese, that's a member of the College of Consultors from July 1982 until 1991, is that right?
I know I was a consultor over that period. I couldn't nominate the years.
Yes. Now, returning to the question of Monsignor John Day, when did you first hear of Monsignor Day's sexual offending against children?
I can't recall exactly. It must have been when it became public, I guess. Would that be in the late 80s?
Well, was it, for example, when
No.
matters about a priest were published in the newspaper?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Was it when matters about a priest, albeit that, I withdraw that, was it when allegations about Monsignor Day were published in the newspaper?
I don't know about the other. I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, let's just break it down. When you were together with Day in the parish of Mildura in the period 1963 to 1968, did you hear anything about Day offending sexually against children in that period?
No.
What was your experience of Monsignor Day as the parish priest in Mildura?
He was a blustering type personality. He put a lot of people off the way he operated. He was a one-man band. He gave me a free go. I did most of the hack work, as you call it, a lot of the priest work, and he did whatever he did and ran the parish in his way.
And you heard no innuendo with regard to Monsignor Day and sexual activity?
None whatsoever.
So you understand by that I'm not confining it to sexual activity with children, I'm putting it on a broader basis. Do you understand that?
Right.
And you heard nothing?
Nothing.
Right.
Did you observe his relationship with the local police sergeant?
I'm sorry, Your Honour.
Did you observe his relationship with the local police?
Certainly observed that. Yes.
What did you observe?
That he was good friends with. I mentioned his name.
Yes.
Yes, Jim Barrett, the local detective in charge.
How did you observe them to be good friends?
Regularly, he would meet with him and a couple of other parishioners, and just seemed to be a little club to themselves.
And what about the clerk of the court,
Yes.
Mr. Carney?
Mr. Carney,
He was also a
Jim
friend of...
Barrett and Angie Vagona. They were the three great friends.
And did you get a sense of what they were doing together?
Well, they were good friends, and they seemed to be in cahoots with Father Day, as he was then, in the way things could be done in the parish. They were just friends with him, probably advising or helping. That was my observation. I really didn't take that much notice of him, except he didn't have many friends, and he had these three people.
Well, you used the word cahoots. Cahoots with regard to what?
I'd say anything that was happening, the organisation. He was a blustering type personality, John Day, and he'd run fixtures to make money at the drop of a hat and make a success of them and work at them. And these three people were there to help him organise, I guess. I don't know what they did, really. They're just close friends and seemed to be that part of the parish he worked, and those three were close to him.
Did you ever get a sense or a suspicion of the possibility of misuse of church property or money?
No.
Or any sense of Monsignor Day being involved or related to criminal activity?
No.
I'd like to show you a statement. It's in the statements bundle at tab 5. It's a statement of Gerald Baldock, dated 24 November 2015. You see that now?
I do.
You know Gerald Anthony Baldock, I take it?
I do.
He's formerly a priest of the diocese, is that right?
That's right.
Yes. And if I show you on the second page, and paragraph 9, which is on the screen, he says that in about 1967 or 1968, now if he's right on the years, those would be years when you were assistant priest in Mildura, is that right?
I was there at that time.
He said, when I'd been in the seminary about 4 years, I started to hear innuendo about Monsignor Day, that he had a love for young boys and that he would take them on trips. I believe that I heard this information from parishioners when I went home to Mildura in summer. I didn't officially pass this on to anyone or contact the bishop. Did you not hear those innuendos or rumours?
No.
Not at all?
No.
If we take a look at paragraph 12 of his statement, he says in the summer of 1970 or 71, a teacher in Mildura, Paul David Ryan, spoke to me about Monsignor Day. I cannot remember exactly what he told me, but he said that Monsignor Day had been involved in paedophilia with altar servers, and he expressed his concern. Paul David Ryan later became a priest in the diocese of Ballarat. Did you know about that at that time?
No.
Looking back, Father, when you read that others knew what was happening in the parish and you were the assistant priest, does it surprise you that you didn't know or hear anything?
Does it surprise me? It does a bit, yes. It surprises me that I didn't hear something.
Well, it suggests that you perhaps weren't in touch with the parishioners.
I was in touch with parishioners.
But here's a visitor, as it were, finding out things you didn't find out when you were resident.
A visitor.
Well, as it were, he's away at the seminary, he comes back for holidays and hears things, and you're there all the time.
Yeah, Jerry Baldock was a native of Mildura. Spent his whole schooling days there. Went to secondary school there. So he would, different contacts from what I had, I guess. But I heard nothing.
Your Honour, I attended that statement of Gerald Baldock.
Gerald Baldock's statement would be Exhibit 28-116.
As Your Honour pleases, I show you, Father, tab 61 of the day tender bundle. This is the newspaper article I was referring to. Father, if we scroll down, you'll see it's recorded on the right-hand side, the Melbourne Observer, 13 August 1972. Were you familiar with that newspaper, the Melbourne Observer?
No.
If we scroll down a bit further, you'll see in the left-hand column, under the word religious, do you see that?
I see religious heading.
Yes, and then and if you go down a couple of paragraphs, it says he said he went to Mildura in 1962. This is the Detective Inspector Child. Another high-ranked detective at the station was a close friend of a Roman Catholic priest. The priest regularly visited the officer, also frequently visited the presbytery. That, of course, is consistent with your recollection, isn't it?
The priest regularly visited the officer.
Yes.
I don't know anything about that.
All right. And then we carry on. Well, certainly your evidence was that the priest and the detective, a higher ranked detective at Mildura Station, were close friends.
All I know is that they regularly that three people regularly visited him.
Yes.
At the presbytery.
And then going further down, it says the detective said he was introduced to a priest, soon after his arrival in Mildura, he recognised him as a clergyman, and he had once seen with 2 known prostitutes in Melbourne. So now this is now the detective here being referred to as Dennis Ryan. He recognised him as a clergyman he had once seen with 2 known prostitutes in Melbourne. He said the priest was in the car with the prostitutes. You see that? I'll let you read that to the bottom of the page. You see that that's all very scandalous conduct for a priest, right?
Sure.
And if you look in the next column, if you go further up, see it goes on to say in September last year, he said a Mildura College headmaster contacted him about allegations involving the priest. As a result, he interviewed a 17-year-old girl who claimed the priest had indecently assaulted her when she was 12. And so it goes on, further scandalous allegations about the priest in Mildura. Now, that was published in 1972. At that time, you were in Hopeton. Do you recall these matters coming to your attention?
No.
You said earlier you thought you first heard about Monsignor John Day having offended sexually against children when matters became public. Is this not what you were referring to, the matters becoming public through a newspaper article?
No. I can't understand that question.
Well, Father, what's being put to you is that a newspaper is a publication. That is, it's available to the public at large. And what's being put to you is that, at least by this time, public knowledge of what Father Day had allegedly been doing was there.
From that newspaper
Yeah.
article. And you're talking about what I knew in the 1960s when I was there.
No, Father. Before I spoke about the 1960s specifically, I asked you when you first came to know of allegations about Father Day sexually offending against children, and you said you thought it was when those matters became public.
Correct.
And now I've identified a time, August 1972, when they were public through the publication in the newspaper, and I'm asking whether it was at this time that you're referring to, or was it some earlier time?
I must admit I'm confused, but this particular accusation in this newspaper is something completely different from what you're asking me about. Father Day having contact with young people in the parish.
The second column that I read to you was allegations that I started reading it to you. Perhaps you want to read it. Was allegations about John Day offending against. Firstly, it says a 17-year-old girl. Then it continues as investigations led him to interview a number of other people. Another Mildura girl, aged 18, said the priest had indecently assaulted her 6 years previously, in other words, when she was 12. Do you see that?
No, I don't. Where is it exactly?
In the second column.
Second column, in September last year. That's second.
Yes.
Just read down that column.
Okay. He's interviewed a 17-year-old girl.
Let's read the next several paragraphs. You needn't read them aloud, Father. We can read it, yeah.
No. I don't ever recall reading that or hearing it.
Father, it may not be a widely circulated newspaper, but this is a front-page story about a priest doing a lot of very bad things, isn't it?
Obviously.
It would seem remarkable if it didn't set at least the priests talking about this issue. Are you saying that didn't happen, to your knowledge?
Didn't happen with me, certainly. In 1972. What month was it?
August.
August. I was out of the country.
But once something like this is out on the front page of a newspaper, it doesn't go away, does it?
Well, I never talked about it or saw it, and in that stage. And
Where were you in August 72?
I was at the Olympic Games in Munich.
When did you come back?
We were away 3 months, I remember. I can't recall exact. So July, August, September, about that time.
Did you go with some other priests from the diocese?
Do I what?
Did you go to the Olympics with some
Yes.
other priests? Who did you go with?
My brother Kevin
Yes.
and Father Bill Milliken.
Yes.
By the way, have you seen this newspaper article before today?
Did that come up in Father Bill Milliken's evidence? Is that? I may have seen it then. Yes. I've never seen the actual article, but there's something.
Were you in court when he gave evidence?
Was I in court when Father Bill was?
Yeah.
No.
Have you spoken to him about what he had to say?
I think I was watching it on the closed circuit television.
Have you spoken to him as well?
I've spoken to him, but not about this.
What did you speak about?
How he got on. He'd been here.
Yeah.
We didn't speak about much because I was more concerned with the fact I had to come.
Yeah.
Father, the 3 months that you were away, where within the 3 months did the Olympic Games fall?
Where was I on the trip away? Is that what you're asking?
I'm saying you said you were away for 3 months, right?
Yes.
Did the Olympic Games fall? The Olympic Games are traditionally 2 weeks, not 3 months.
No, they weren't on for 3 months, but I was at the Olympic Games while I was away.
Yes.
We had a 3 months long service leave, 3 of us, with a married couple, Frank and Dulcie Duffy.
And did
We
you
had
go?
a tour of Ireland, England, went to the test matches, went to Rome.
Never mind your whole itinerary, Father. Just where did the Olympic Games fall within the 3 months? Was it at the end, the beginning, the middle?
August, I suppose. It was towards the end of the trip, yeah,
Towards the end.
I think.
Yes.
I'm sure it was towards the end.
I'll show you in the statements bundle, tab 1, the statement of BPA. Father, there's a list of pseudonyms on your right-hand side there. Father Rundle, there's a list of pseudonyms there. If you can have a look, there's about the 8th name down. Without you saying the name, you'll see that there's a pseudonym BPA. Do you see that? Bravo Papa Alpha.
BPB, did you say?
BPA.
BPA. I've got BPA, yes.
Yes, and do you see the name adjacent to BPA?
Yes.
Do you know that name? Do you know
No.
that? No. In any event, that's whose statement this is that I'm about to show you. You'll see it on the screen. 30 September 2015. Do you see that? And I'll show you the top of page 3. She says that in early January 1972, Monsignor Day came to stay for a couple of days. Now, I'm showing you that just to identify the time. So early January 1972. Now, if we can go over the page, you'll see that at paragraph 19, she says, this is following the events that she set out on the previous page, my husband was in a rage and rang the Mildura Presbytery straight after our conversation with my eldest son. He couldn't get to the phone quick enough. Father Peter Taff answered. Now, you know that priest, do you, Father?
I do.
Yes. I was in the room when my husband called. I couldn't hear what was being said to my husband, but I could hear what my husband was saying. can't remember the exact conversation. And then 21, after he hung up, my husband told me that Father Taff's first words were, I thought he was over all of this. And that's a reference to Monsignor Day offending against their son, BPA's son. Now, that was January 1972. Now, Father Taff replaced you in May 1968 at Madeira, is that right?
Yeah, I think he came then.
Is that right?
Well, I think so. I know I left in 68.
Yes. And you then moved on to Warrnambool, is that right?
That's correct.
And did Father Taff not tell you at all about this phone call that he had received from this person's husband?
No.
No. He didn't mention that to you subsequently when you were at Hopeton?
No.
Now, Gerald Ridsdale was an assistant priest in Mildura from 1964 to 1966 when you were assistant priest there, is that right?
I know he was there a couple of years, almost anyway,
Yes.
while I was there.
And did you and he and Monsignor Day live in the same presbytery?
Yeah, we lived in the same house.
So that's you and Gerald Ridsdale and John Day?
Correct.
Yes. And during the time that you lived in the same house with him for a couple of years, did you come to hear of any complaints or rumours about Ridsdale and sexual offending against children?
No.
Or any form of sexual offending?
What's that last statement?
Or any form
No.
of sexual offending?
No, I heard nothing.
What was your impression of Gerald Ridsdale?
He was a bit like John Day. He was a blustering type person. Always going and coming and going.
And you didn't have any sort of suspicions of
No, I
untoward
had no suspicions.
activities, any sort of criminal activities by Ridsdale? No. Father, when did you first hear of Gerald Ridsdale having offended against children?
When the full thing came out, when he was received his sentence, was when I finally became fully aware.
Yes, of course, that's when you finally became fully aware, but when did you first hear
I
that
can't remember.
it would have...
I presume it would have been then that it would be the first indication of the...
Well, was it not during your time as a consultor?
No, I heard, as a matter of fact, with the consultor appointment, I was in Swan Hill and then Robinvale in those times. If you know our diocese, you'll realise that that's 3-4 drive to Ballarat, 6-8 hour return journey.
Well, never mind that, because Ridsdale also moved around a lot, but as a consultor, you had to go to Ballarat several times a year for consulta meetings, is that right?
Correct.
And when you were in Ballarat for consulta meetings, did you stay overnight?
No, that's why I'm telling you that it is important that you know that as a consulta, my understanding was, as a priest in a remote parish who had knowledge of parishes and people, and my whole life immersed in that parish, and not being a religious order person, not having talking to other priests as a group, that's where my interests were. And I came down, as I remember, every time to a consultants meeting, as a consultant simply to listen to what parishes were now vacant, who would go there. And I had no knowledge or interest in anything else. And I drove down early and would drive back. And I would have a mass before I left and get back perhaps to another meeting. And since then I've had perhaps 3,000 meetings with organisations in the town where my interest was, where my home was, and the Ballarat scene was a bit foreign.
Well,
So, in answer to your query, no, I never stopped overnight in Ballarat. Went down to the meeting and came back.
Even when the meetings lasted the whole day?
But the meeting lasted the whole day. I was there for the whole day and drove home.
And Father, I understand that the information and knowledge and experience that you had, that you were able to contribute to the consultors' meetings, was drawn from the parishes that you served in. Is that right?
Yes, that would be, my knowledge would be what type of people they were and what type of priest would be suitable.
And other members of the consultors, the College of Consultors, would come to the meetings with their knowledge and experience of other parts of the diocese and other people in the diocese. Is that right?
They would, and they would have much better knowledge than I would of other matters that perhaps they wanted to bring up, and which I would have no interest or knowledge about.
And a matter on which you had some knowledge or interest, you would then have the opportunity to raise it and talk about it.
The opportunity was for me there, if the bishop wanted to consult. I wasn't there in an executive position. I was able to be consulted. If my opinion was disregarded, too bad.
Yes, Father. So if, for example, the question of appointment came up in a parish you were familiar with,
Yes,
and you had something to say about the nature of that parish or the needs of that parish, you might contribute that in the advice you gave to the bishop. Is that right?
correct.
And similarly, if another parish appointment arose and someone else at the meeting had something to say about that other parish, they would then have the opportunity to say that, not
Right.
so. And the same would be true in respect of any particular individuals who are being considered for an appointment. Would that be right?
I suppose so.
So if you knew someone, you might give your views to the bishop in the meeting as to the suitability of that person for the contemplated appointment.
Yes, if I was asked for it and I felt it was relevant.
And equally, some other member of the consultors who had knowledge or experience of someone who was being contemplated for an appointment, they might raise what they know and offer it by way of advice in the meeting.
Sure.
Yes. And you would then hear what they had to say, even though you didn't know that person yourself. Is that right?
Right.
And you accept that the College of Consultors had a responsibility across the whole of the parish, the whole of the diocese.
They had a responsibility to be consultants.
Yes. And so you would have been concerned to ensure that the advice that was given to the bishop in respect of any appointment anywhere in the diocese was the best advice that could be given, not so?
Yes, I would.
Yes. And now, if a question of a priest having sexually offended against children at any stage arose, that would be something of some moment, wouldn't it?
I'm sorry, if that was mentioned
Yes.
at the meeting,
Yes.
it would be of grave concern.
So even if it arose in relation to someone who was not at a parish that you were familiar with, or in relation to someone whom you didn't personally know, it would still be a matter of some interest to you because of the gravity of it.
For sure.
Yes. So your narrow interest with regard to particular parishes, or your narrow experience with regard to particular parishes, wouldn't prevent you from hearing about any point that might have been raised about a priest having sexually offended against children.
No, it wouldn't, but I never heard that sort of thing mentioned.
Yes. Well,
Not at the consultants' meeting.
if we come back to Ridsdale,
Can I have a glass of water?
yes, of course. If we come back to Ridsdale, you were a consultor from 1982 to 1991.
Thank you. Say that again.
You were a consultor from 1982 to 1991.
I can't remember the dates, but I was there for quite a while.
Are you saying with confidence, Father, that in the period that you were a consultor, you heard nothing about Ridsdale offending against children?
I can't remember hearing that at a consultants' meeting, no.
Well, is the point that you don't recall, or is the point that it didn't happen? When you say you don't recall that, are you saying it might have happened, you just don't remember it?
I don't remember it happening.
Yeah. I'll show you the minutes in the Ridsdale. Before I do that, Your Honour, I tender the statement of BPA, which is at tab 1.
BPA, isn't it?
Yeah.
That statement will be Exhibit 2817.
That's Your Honour. I'll show you the Ridsdale tender bundle, tab 18. Father, you'll see on the screen there, the minutes of a consultants meeting held on 14 September 1982 at 3:10 p.m. And you are listed as one of the attendees. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you'll see partway down the page, it will be shown to you, the portion that's underlined in relation to staffing. It says the Bishop advised that it had become necessary for Father Gerald Ridsdale to move from the parish of Mortlake. Negotiations are underway to have him work with the Catholic Inquiry Centre in Sydney. A new appointment to Mortlake will be necessary to take effect after October 17. Father, do you have any recollection of the discussion or indeed of the Bishop's report which is reflected there?
No, I don't have any recollection of the meeting itself. But I do have a recollection. The process there was we didn't get an agenda. The meeting progressed. Then the minutes were read at the next meeting. But in the meantime, whatever moves were made would be sent to all the priests, which was my main concern as a consultant. What moves were made, who was going where. But I do recall looking at that appointment of Jerry Ridsdale to the Catholic Inquiry Centre and thinking to myself, having known Jerry Ridsdale in Mildura, that that might be a good appointment for him, whatever the reason may be, to office type work.
But do I understand that of what was actually reported to you and of any discussion that there may have been, you remember nothing?
No, I don't remember any discussion at that meeting.
I'll show you tab 27. You'll see this is the minute of the consultants meeting of 8 August 1983, and you are recorded as present at the end of the list. Do you see that?
Yes, if it's there, I was there.
Yes, and I'll show you over the page. Where it's underlined, it says Father G. Ridsdale, CEC, that's Catholic Inquiry Centre. Father J. Fitzpatrick, National Director of the CEC, requested that Father Ridsdale remain for a second year with the Catholic Inquiry Centre. Do you have any recollection of that request that Father Ridsdale remain there for another year?
No, I don't remember.
None. Now, there's been evidence before this commission by Father McDermott, now of the Melbourne, at least the Brisbane Archdiocese. Did you hear his evidence?
No, I didn't hear his evidence.
I beg your pardon, Melbourne Archdiocese.
Correct.
You didn't hear his evidence. He said that somewhere in the early 80s, he was told by the parish priest of Camperdown that there was an informal meeting of priests from around Mortlake, including Monsignor Fiscalini and Father Melican, to discuss Ridsdale and the problems of Ridsdale in Mortlake. Did you ever come to know of such a meeting?
No.
I take it you didn't attend such a meeting.
What year was that?
Between 1980 and May 1982.
No, I've never heard of that meeting.
Now, if I show you tab 34. You'll see this minutes of the consultants meeting 23 January 1986, and you see your name is included amongst those who were present. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And you'll see at the foot of that page, it will be scrolled up for you, Reverend Gerald Ridsdale was appointed assistant priest of Horsham. Do you see that?
Of Horsham?
Yes.
Yes, I see that.
Yes. Do you remember the occasion on which Ridsdale was appointed to Horsham after he had returned from the Catholic Inquiry Centre?
No.
You don't remember? And you don't remember that he had previously been a parish priest, and here he was being appointed to an assistant priest position. Do you not remember that?
No.
And if I can show you 46, tab 46. This is a meeting in June 1988, and you'll see that you listed as being present. Do you see that?
I do.
And down the page, we'll see it says, under personnel, Reverend G. Ridsdale, it was reported that it became necessary to move out of the parish ministry. Do you recall when Ridsdale was removed from parish ministry?
No, I can't recall that.
You have no recollection of any report or explanation that the bishop may have given as to why Ridsdale was being removed or removed?
No, I don't remember him giving any report.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Now, when did you first know Father Paul David Ryan?
Paul David Ryan, under another name, was a lad at school in Mildura when I was there, and I recall him. I recall seeing him. I didn't get to know him, but I think in those years he was at the secondary college. And I sort of got to know most of the people at the college in that time. And I didn't get to know him, but I can remember seeing him and knowing who he was. And then the next, that answers your question, was it? Or the next thing I heard of him was he was a priest in our diocese under the name of Paul David Ryan.
And how did you make the connection between this priest in your diocese, Paul David Ryan?
Father, somebody told me that he was.
Father, you must wait, please, for me to finish asking my question, and then you can answer. What caused you to draw the connection between Father Paul David Ryan, a priest of your diocese, and this boy whom you'd known, or at least seen and known of earlier under a different name?
Oh, I guess somebody told me.
And when did you first hear that Paul David Ryan had allegations against him with regard to sexually offending against children?
Oh, I've got no idea.
Well, perhaps we can help you if I show you in the Ryan Tender Bundle, tab 47. That's a minute of the meeting of the consultants on 18 January 1985, and you see you are listed as present. Do you see that?
I do.
And partway down the page, you'll see then, adjacent to the heading Business on the left, it says Bishop Malkerns advised. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
And then the second point, under that, it says Father Paul David Ryan, Warrnambool, has applied for study leave in USA for 2 to, looks like 5 years, perhaps it's 3, it was decided to grant the request. Do you have any recollection of that item?
No.
None of any discussion?
No, I can't recall any discussion.
And tab 53.
Sorry?
There's a new tab coming up. This is the minute of the meeting on, it looks like 19 December 1985. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you see that you listed as present.
Yes.
And further down, it says that the 1986 staffing, Father Paul David Ryan will be available from March 1986. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
Do you have any recollection of that, of the return of Ryan and him becoming available for appointment?
No, I have no memory of that.
Do you have any recollection, Father, of any discussion at a consultors meeting about Paul David Ryan?
No,
None whatsoever.
none whatsoever.
Even when he resigned from Penshurst Parish? You don't have a recollection
No,
of
I
him
can't
resigning?
recall.
Now, there's another priest who we refer to as BPB. Do you know who I'm referring to?
Is it here?
It is there, yes.
BPD.
No, B. So,
BPB. Yes, I know that person.
yes. And so between you and I, we'll try not to...
Have you got the right person? Yes, I suppose you have. I'm just looking at the transcript. You're on the same page? It's BPB, is it?
Yes. That's the one immediately under the one we were looking at earlier, the woman whose statement we looked
That's
at?
correct.
Yes. And do you remember when you first heard of any problem or complaint that BPB had of sexually offending against children?
No.
Is there not an occasion on which someone else, another priest, Barry Ryan, said something to you about BPB?
Barry Ryan coming to me about BPB, did you
Yes.
say?
Having said something to you about BPB.
I recall Barry Ryan talking to me about BPB, yes.
Yes. Yes, and what did he say to you?
As I recall, he wasn't impressed with him, the way he was, something about his behaviour in front of people, or it just didn't seem to be appropriate. He didn't go into great detail.
Well, it didn't seem to be appropriate. In what sense did you get that? You have bad table manners, or?
No.
Well, what was
I think
it?
it was the way he was conducting himself with young people by, I think what Barry said at that time, might tickle them or have a bit of fun pushing them. I just forget exactly it, but he just said that. I recall that.
He had grounds to think that that was more than just innocent.
More what?
Or the BPB's engagement with children was other than innocent.
Was it?
Is that what he was
no,
saying?
it wasn't. He didn't go that far. Just worried about it. That it just wasn't the sort of thing that.
What was the cause for the worry?
I don't know whether he was particularly worried, but he noticed it.
Well, he wasn't worried, I take it, that he was tickling children who were ticklish and didn't like to be tickled. It was,
I didn't go into any details with him.
well, you having remembered it, does that not suggest that what he was saying to you was something more serious? Not that he necessarily had knowledge of it, but that he suspected or was worried that this father was having an interaction with children that was inappropriate.
Yeah, strange
Yes.
anyway.
And by which he worried that it was not innocent.
I didn't say that.
So I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honour.
Does anyone else have any questions? Anyone else? You can go first.
My name's Hanscom. I'm here for a number of victims of clergy abuse, including victims of Gerald Ridsdale. At transcript 14897, a little while back, in answer to a question from Mr. Stewart, you told the Commission that you thought an office-type appointment would be a good appointment for Gerald Ridsdale. Do you remember that?
That's right, yes.
That's when he was going to the CEC. You remember saying that?
In Catholic Inquiry Centre?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry. And you thought that because he'd be better out of parish work, didn't you?
I didn't say that.
I know that. I'm putting to you that that's
You're
why
asking?
that's why you thought office-type work would be better for him.
No, I thought it was a good appointment because I reckon he was good at office work.
And he'd be better doing office work than in a parish.
I don't know that he'd be better at it, but he was good at it.
Nothing else.
It's one update I'd like to hear for the just in relation to when you first became aware of Paul David Ryan, did you aware of him by that name or any other name as he was becoming ready for ordination in the mid-70s?
I must admit, as I tried to point out, my priestly life has been well away. It's a big diocese, 6 hours, 7 hours drive, one end to the other. I had no association with Paul David Ryan and didn't know him at all in that regard, preparation, or as a priest.
Were you aware that his reputation, as described in one instance by the parish priest, involved awareness of complaints from parishioners such that if Paul was to appear in Ballarat, he might be run out of town?
Am I aware of that?
Yes.
No, I'm not aware of that comment or
Because the same letter also refers to annual retreats and that there may have been concerns. Did you recall annual retreats that the priest would have?
I recall retreats the priest had, yes.
And was Paul David Ryan discussed, or were you aware of him attending one of those retreats around that time?
I can't remember him attending the retreats. He could have and probably did, and I can't remember any discussion about him.
Or what about Father Boylan?
What about Father Boylan?
Were you aware of Father Boylan raising concerns about Paul David Ryan around that time?
No, I can't remember.
Okay. And then you go on study leave in 1978. Did you come into contact with Paul David Ryan during that study leave?
No.
You sure you both went to America around the same time?
I went in, I presume December 79, was it?
You tell me when you left.
I can't remember. It's either December 79 or December 78.
It says January 79, you're in Swan Hill as I read your CV. Happy for a copy to be brought up for you. It says Camperdown 3/10/1973 to the end of 1977. Then study leave America 1978 and then Swan Hill from January 1979.
Correct. Okay, I've got it. I went to America in December 78.
It's December 78.
Yes, and I left there in the middle of the next year.
All right. And did you have any contact with Brian Finnegan at that time?
Yes.
When did you have contact with Brian Finnegan?
Brian Finnegan was at Catholic University in Washington. I was at Fordham University in New York City. And we went on holidays together.
did you discuss Paul David Ryan during any of those holidays?
Not that I know of.
Well, you'd recall it, wouldn't you?
I would recall it, yeah.
Because it was a matter that Brian Finnegan had
No, he
discussions
never mentioned it to me.
Sorry, you cut me off then. but
Sorry.
It was a matter that Brian Finnegan had some discussions with Bishop Mulcairns. Are you aware of that?
No,
Not aware of it at the time?
no.
Absolutely sure? How would you know that Brian
I'm
Finnegan...
not absolutely sure. My memory is I didn't.
Very firm on what you don't know. Could I take you to...
I'm sorry, I missed that comment.
You seem to be very sure about things that you don't know. Very quick to say, no, I had no knowledge of Brian Finnegan's knowledge of discussions with Bishop Mulcairns.
I know I went on holidays with Brian Finnegan and we had a good break.
And he didn't discuss Paul David Ryan at all?
Not that I can recall.
And didn't discuss that he was just meeting up with him or had discussions with Bishop Mulcairns about him?
No, not that I recall.
Could I ask you to provide a document number 27 in the Paul David Ryan tender bundle? It's a letter from Brian Finnegan to Bishop Mulcairns on the 9th of May 1978.
What is it, a letter to what?
Well, I can say it. Well, it's dated, you see the front page, it's dated, I think, 9 May 1978.
Yeah, I see, 1978, is it? Yeah.
And can I just take you over to page 2? It is a bit hard to read the date, but I take it from other documents that it's 1978 because it's behind one dated 4 May 1978. Can you go over to page 2, please, and then page 3? Do you see the signature there, Brian Finnegan?
I see the signature.
And you see above that it says, I rang Paul R tonight. But he is down in Virginia.
Yes, I see that.
He may have been in touch with you. He called me on April 5 and had a long talk. He appreciated my leaving him free to find himself. I can't read the next words. I'm not sure if you can.
No, I can't.
Honestly, a desire to see Peter Hudson. Do you know who Peter Hudson was? If it's Peter Hudson, might be another name. Can you just then see the signature Brian Finnegan? Do you see that underneath that? Seems like some sort of file note.
I see a little bit of writing there with Dan Arundel.
Yes, you'll see May 21 to 29th, care of Alf Berman.
Yes.
It says with Dan Arundel.
Correct.
Would that be you?
It was.
So would that refresh your memory about whether or not you'd caught up with Brian Finnegan in the United States?
I've already told you that.
Well, you said you didn't.
I'm sorry. I said I did.
Okay, well, you said you were there in the end of 1978.
That's when I was there in the United States.
Okay.
From December 1978. I'm all mixed up now.
That's the problem. Yeah, you were there earlier than December 1978, weren't you?
Yes, and I spent 18 months there.
So you were there in May 1978?
No, I came December 78.
All right, well, do you see this file note seems to imply that Brian Finnegan has caught up with you in May 1978?
I just thought that'd be 79.
I can only say that the next document in the tender bundle and the one before that seem to be 1978. And I'm asking you the questions. I'm not necessarily going to challenge on your memory of the dates, but if it's a case that Brian Finnegan had spoken to Paul David Ryan and the very next item in his memo there is in fact a conversation or a meeting with you, do you think that's a meeting with you or a conversation?
Now, when I looked at that writing there, it was just a little note letting whoever he was writing to know that that's when he'd be with me on holidays. I picked him up in Washington and we drove down to Tennessee. Just a couple of 5 days or whatever it was.
Yes, all right. So you were there with him in America, and just to ask you one more time, are you absolutely sure you didn't discuss in any way, not whether it was related to homosexual or paedophilia, but any discussion at all about a meeting with Paul David Ryan only a half a month earlier?
I'm absolutely sure that I can't recall it.
Okay, that's... if you could try to recall it now, could it be the sort of thing you might have discussed?
I doubt it.
You doubt it. Why do you doubt it? Why couldn't it have been something you may have discussed?
Brian Finnegan and I had common background in the Western District, priest in the diocese for a long while, doing courses in America, a lot of things to discuss, going on holidays for a break.
But you've got a fellow Australian there from your diocese, Paul David Ryan, assuming that you're not aware, as you say, you aren't aware of anything nefarious involving his activity. Why wouldn't he have just said, oh, by the way, I caught up with Paul Ryan earlier this month? That sort of thing he could have said?
I suppose you have to ask him.
No,
I didn't know.
I'm asking you.
What are you asking me?
Did you have a discussion about Paul David Ryan with Brian Finnegan in any way, shape or form in the United States of America?
And I'll answer you again in the same way. I don't recall having any conversation with Brian Finnegan about Paul David Ryan.
In any way, shape or form?
In any way, shape or form.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Stewart?
I have nothing further for this witness, Your Honour.
Yes, thank you. To conclude your evidence, you may step down. You're excused.
Thank you.
Your Honour, I call BPD. And BPD's statement as originally served is at tab 18, but through those representing him, he's requested some further redactions from that statement that was served subject to DNP. So I will tender a statement that has further redactions shortly.
Well, how do we manage that?
Well, I'll not tender the one in the tender bundle. I'll tender one separately.
You've got a separate document for us, haven't you?
Yes.
Very well. Mr. BPD, will you take an oath on the Bible or an affirmation? Oath on the Bible?
Oh, either way.
Whatever you wish.
Yeah, affirmation.
It's your choice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Would you repeat after me? I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, truly, sincerely
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give to this Royal Commission
that the evidence I do give to this Royal Commission
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
nothing but the truth.
Yes, take a seat, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If you have a look at the pseudonym list on your right-hand side, about the 8th item down, there's a name, and adjacent to it is the pseudonym BPD. Are you that person whose name appears there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, thank you. And you have before you a statement dated 23 October 2015 that has been redacted. Is that your statement?
Yes.
Do you confirm that it is true and correct?
Yes.
I tender this statement, Your Honour.
It'll be Exhibit 28, 118.
And I'd ask you if you would read your statement, perhaps starting at paragraph 3.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Is it all right to say redacted?
Yes, or you can just skip over those parts. You can skip over them, or if there's some other wording you want to use which conveys that, that's up to you.
That's okay. Thank you. I grew up in redacted and went to redacted college, redacted. One of the priests redacted at the time was Father Paul David Ryan. I remember when he wasn't saying Mass, Father Ryan used to sit down the back of the church and talk to all the young guys. In 1985, I was 17 years old. Redacted, redacted. Father Ryan, redacted, redacted. Father Ryan's role was redacted, redacted. Father Ryan sexually abused me twice. After I left school, I worked in a bank for 4 years and then spent 4 years working in a hospital. Being young, I was going out at night, so I stopped attending Mass regularly. When I was about 26, I started to go Mass again quite frequently, almost every day. In about 1993, I spoke to Father Redacted about joining the priesthood because I was all over the shop and I was looking for something to do with my life. He sent me to see Father Brendan Davey, who was the parish priest at Ararat. I went and saw Father Davey at the presbytery. There I told him I was interested in joining the priesthood. He said, "Oh yes, lovely, fantastic, beautiful." He sent me to get a psychologist Psychologist, thank you. I was going the wrong way. Report from Dr. Ronald Conway. I cannot exactly remember where I saw Dr. Conway, but I do recall it was a large old house in one of the inner suburbs of Melbourne. Dr. Conway made me do a series of tests. One involved lining up coloured cards in order I thought appropriate. The other one involved an ink blot test where I had described the image I was seeing. I only had the one appointment. Nobody else was present during this session and there was no staff members there at all. I think I would have been there for about roughly an hour and a half. Sometime after I saw Dr. Conway, Father Davey rang me to tell him I'd have passed the psychologist test. I went to Ballarat Presbytery to meet Father Davey again to discuss the next steps. While I was speaking to Father Davey, Father Paul David Ryan walked into the room. A couple of boys who were about